We did 3 one-day movies and then just bam, bam, bam. So like in a matter of like 11 days, we had shot like 4 movies.
Welcome to the Lion Killer podcast, where I interview the fascinating people that are crazy enough to be involved in the business of micro-budget filmmaking. Today on the show, I have a very prolific micro-budget filmmaker and YouTuber, the famous, the world-renowned, Mr. J Horton. How you doing, man?
I'm good. I prefer like the infamous.
The infamous.
Yeah.
In hip-hop, that's always cool if you're infamous. I don't,
Right.
So how you doing, man? Everything, you holding up okay?
Yeah, I'm doing good. I'm in Van Nuys right now, so we're getting ready for curfew, and it's kind of crazy right now.
Oh, Van Nuys, I know it well. I used to live in West Covina as a teenager. Yeah, San Gabriel Valley. My first job that wasn't raking leaves or something, was throwing newspapers for the San Gabriel Valley Tribune. And I was like 12, 13. So are you originally from that area?
No, I'm originally from Indiana. I went to college in Louisiana, New Orleans, and then I moved to LA like a little bit after Katrina.
So I guess that brings me to my first question, which is how you got involved in filmmaking and how that led to LA and a career in filmmaking.
Well, I always wanted to be a filmmaker, but I was from Fort Wayne, Indiana, and it didn't seem, and this was 20 years ago, so it didn't seem like a feasible thing to do. So I screwed around, did drugs, drunk a lot. I was in a band. I got to be about 22, and I was just like, man, just not accomplishing anything. And my brother worked offshore in Louisiana on a utility boat, and he talked me into taking a job out there. So I did it for a year, saved some money, and then went to school. While I was in school, they had a good film program at the University of New Orleans. So I started, taking more film classes, and that kind of sparked it there. I was working offshore, so I would ship out of Lafourche Parish. I was in a little town called Cutoff, Louisiana.
Mm-hmm.
And I did that for about a year and then went to film school there. There was a short time where I was in film school where I was like, maybe this still isn't feasible. So like I was doing some pre-law stuff and, got engaged. And then right after that engagement kind of went sour, I went back full steam into film. Yeah, I was a deckhand and a relief engineer. It was kind of like, I always describe it as my military. It's not the same thing, but it was kind of where I learned how to be responsible for myself. I learned how to be responsible for others. I learned how to cook. I learned discipline, learned how to take orders. Cause when you're under a captain there, it's like, it's like martial law. You're under their thing. And it was cool. And it was, this group of like manly men, and you're doing this like manly work, and it was cool. I mean, I wrote a lot, because I was like 12 hours on, 12 hours off. So like, I think I wrote my first like 2 or 3 screenplays out there. And it got my head straight. I'll say that.
Did you have that experience, this experience of being offshore and all the things you just described, did that play into your filmmaking career?
Oh yeah, totally. I mean, like I said, it really, I feel like that's where I learned how to be an adult, and the experiences out there. Like filmmaking, especially writing, is about, it's about life experience. And if you don't have life experience and you're just writing about what you've seen in other movies or whatever, your stuff's hollow, and even though like I'm not writing screenplays about living offshore or anything, but like those emotional experiences, feed into the work. Definitely.
So then how did you get to LA from there?
Okay. So I graduated college, got my BA there, and me and 2 other friends decided we wanted to shoot our first feature. This was right when the Panasonic DVX 100 had come out, first 24p camera. And we were like, oh man, we could get this camera for a couple $1,000s and we can make a movie. And so my friend was working as an assistant editor for this like lawyer, like they shot lawyer videos, video production. And he talked the guy into a couple of $1,000s, and we made this like super low budget, like zombie, like horror movie called Rise of the Undead. and we finished it, you know, and got it distributed.
So you're looking at 15 years ago.
15 years, yeah. So it was DVD. You know, this was pre-streaming. You know, we sold it to York Entertainment, who, you know, not so great. But at the time, it was like, hey, we had our movie out, and it was on shelves, and, you know, it was cool, you know. And I thought, you know, so the plan was we released that, and we're going to move to LA. So, like, you know, between the release and, you know, when we were going to move, Katrina happened. So I ended up cutting that time frame down. I moved out right after Katrina. So the movie had come out, and I was like, okay, I'm going to get to LA, and it's going to be like, welcome, come direct our movies. This is going to be awesome, right? I've done a movie.
We've been waiting for you. We've been waiting for you.
It was in Blockbuster, you know, what? Come on. And man, I couldn't get a job doing anything. I mean, anything, you know, so I ended up, you know, I crashed on a friend's couch for a few months. I ended up getting a job at Starbucks. Worked at Starbucks. I mean, I couldn't get a job as an editor or a cameraman. I mean, nothing. I think it took me maybe a year in LA before I got my first like production job. Like, you know, one led to another after that. But that first year was like, it was humbling. It's like, I was like, I was going to, you know, welcome to the kingdom. And no, it wasn't like that. But it was tough. But I got a camera gig for, I was shooting behind the scenes footage because I still had that DVX camera. It was on this super low budget, well, not super low budget. It was like $100,000 horror movie called Butcher House. And I really hit it off with the director. And he was great with actors, man. I mean, the whole technique that I use today, even I learned from this guy. I mean, just loved it. But so anyway, we were shooting that, and the guy doing special effects for it was getting ready to produce his first horror movie. Like, he had done effects on a bunch. His name was Tom Devlin. And him and his girlfriend, Lola, who's now his wife, were getting ready to shoot this, and their DP just quit. They was like one day from shooting. Now, I'm not really a DP, but I owned the camera, and they were just like, hey, just come do it. So I did it. And then through that and like the EP that was on Butcher House, he hooked me up with another filmmaker named Jean-Claude Lamar. He does like Black Christian movies. And he would hire me to shoot and edit his movies. And like, he did this series called Pastor Jones. And I mean, dude, he was shooting these movies for like $3,000 or $4,000, like nothing. And like, I think he did like 100,000 units on that first movie. Like, I mean, he was killing it. I mean, I still, like, you know, to this day, like, base a little bit of my business model on him. I mean, he's one of the sharpest business filmmakers I've ever met. I mean, really good. So I had done Rise of the Undead, but then there was like, I think 3 years between that and Edges of Darkness. Mm-hmm. So, you know, nothing in between there except working for other people. But then I was shooting I was a camera op on this comedy documentary thing. It was such a bad idea. They got like 6 stand-up comedians, and they were all going to just basically like when comedians get real, like just set up the cameras and let them discuss. But anyway, the EP on it, like I hit it off with him, and they had all the camera, like a TV set up in the back where we would kind of live direct some of it. So I was back there and I was talking to him, and I told him I was a writer and I'd made this other movie for like $5,000, and he was just wanting to get into narrative stuff. So he was super into it. So anyway, he asked if I had a horror script, a zombie script, and I didn't, but I was like, oh man, I could write one in a couple of weeks. And we came up with Edges of Darkness, and that became, he produced that. I think our budget was like $25,000, and that was my first like LA movie.
So you do the first film in New Orleans, you go to LA, takes a couple years, meet a couple people, work hard, network. That leads to your second feature, your first LA film, if that mean, you know what I mean? In this day and age. Yeah. What does that mean? But
exactly.
When he said I want a zombie movie. Now the thing historically with indie film is we don't have any money. What genre should we pick? Horror. And of course, 90% of the horror movies are going to be zombie movies.
Yeah.
But do you recommend horror as a jump off for first time filmmakers?
I do. This is what I say about, first time film. I say whatever you're going to do, and there's different genres that sell better here or there, but do the genre that you're the most into. Like, I mean, yes, you worry about audience, but there's audiences for every genre. But like, if you're not into it, it's gonna read. You know what I mean? And like at that time, I was super into zombie stuff. So like that made sense for me. And yeah, horror does make a good jumping off point. But anything can. If you make it well, anything can be a good jumping off point.
Okay, that's good advice. I mean, I did a jiu-jitsu love story.
There you go.
So then where do you go from there after the zombie feature?
So I can't remember if it happened right before or right after, but I was working for Jean-Claude, and I did a bunch of his movies, and mostly as an editor and a shooter. And there was another filmmaker named David Garcia. He was coming out of Louisiana. Actually, a friend of mine in Louisiana had introduced me. And he wanted to basically replicate what Jean-Claude was doing, but he wanted to do it on a slightly bigger scale. And so he hired me to direct and edit movies for him. And our first one was called Shoulda Put a Ring on It. And we made that with Robin Givens and Miguel Munez Jr. from Return of the Living Dead.
Oh, yeah.
So it's like a romantic comedy. And I'd never done romantic comedy, so it was totally new. I was just excited to be being hired to direct. So I was like, oh, great. So I did that for them. And, it turned out pretty well. It did well for them. And then like maybe 2 years later, I started doing like a lot of work for them. So I directed, I don't know, maybe 10 movies for those guys. And
yeah, I was looking at your IMDb, and it looked as though like in 1 year you had 5 feature credits. Is that correct?
Yeah, or more maybe, because I'm trying to remember the year, but I know
I got 2013. It looked like it was pretty busy. Probably 2013, 14.
Yeah, between like 2012 and like 14, I think I directed like 10 movies for those guys. Like I know there was 1 month where we did 4 movies. So
that's what I'm going to say. So between 2012 and 14, that's 2 years to do 10 movies.
Yeah,
that's like
it was
a movie every three and a half months, or what is that?
Oh, usually their turnaround was a little quicker. I mean, they would shoot them. I mean, the thing is they had their business set up. So before we even shot a frame, the movies were sold. They had artwork for them. Like they were placed. So like if we're shooting a movie in April, it's coming out. It's going to hit the streets in June. So it's like, and sometimes shorter, so like we would shoot them, like our production schedules were anywhere from, I mean, I've done movies with them as short as 1 day and like, as long as like 8. I think 8 was longest I ever did with those guys.
Now, in the current landscape for micro budget filmmaking, 8 might be on the long side for your production schedule. Usually 4 to 6 days, or maybe 8 to 10 is kind of long.
Yeah.
But 1 day, that's just incredible. How'd you pull that off?
Yeah, those are, so when they first came to me with the idea, I was just like, no, like it can't be done. But and I knew in the back of my head that no, whether it could be done or not, like these are never going to be great movies, but
They're going to be finished though.
They're going to be. I was so excited about the challenge. Like, can I do this? And they were pointing me to another filmmaker in Louisiana that was doing them, but they were basically doing filmed stage plays. They would set up like 2 or 3 cameras and they would just do the thing like a play. And it was basically in one room and they would just do it. And there was no real coverage. It wasn't even sitcom coverage. It was so bad. So, they were just horrible. But I've been editing for a really long time. Like I knew coverage really well. I'd done live TV directing in college. So like I kind of knew how to do multiple camera setups. So I was like, I think I can do this and make it look like a movie. Like it might not be the best movie, but it'll look like a movie. So, we got a DP who we'd been working with who moved pretty fast. And we basically, we rented a soundstage, which had, I think, like 3 or 4 like pre-built sets. They're like a restaurant, apartment, another apartment, something else. So we'd go in there with 3 cameras. We would set up the cameras. I'd do a rehearsal with the actors the scene once through, and then we would basically shoot the scene twice. So we'd shoot it once in basic coverage. I'd have a master, have kind of a medium wide on one side, a medium wide on the other, and then we'd do it twice, and then we'd break, and then we'd do another set of coverage, and then in the second one I would start getting into close-ups and stuff like that. So if depending on how many characters there were, we might have a camera that's kind of fishing. We'd have cameras assigned to people, and I kind of had it broke down ahead of time. So we did it. We shot it. The first one we did, I think it was like 11 hours. We always had our days under 12 because we couldn't afford overtime. And another reason to do this, and I mentioned it in a video, is so these guys were really, they were doing like cover box casting. Like they would get a name actor, they would shoot him out in a day, and the actor would be in like 5 minutes of the movie. And then around 2014-15, distributors were getting a little more savvy to this, so they didn't like it so much anymore. So like we want the name actor, but they need to be in it more. So like, hey, well, we get a name actor, we still pay him for one day, but we shoot the whole movie, and they're like the star. So like one of these movies had Tywin Turner from Menace to Society, and Paula J. Walker, and I forget who else. We had 3 or 4, and we just did the whole thing,
In one day.
In one day, yeah. And so that month, we did one 6-day movie, and then that wrapped, and we had 1 day off, and then we went right into the soundstage, and we did 3 1-day movies. Well, one of them was 2 days, 2 were 1 day, and then just bam, 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 and we shot them concurrent, just like no break after that. So like in the matter of like 6 days, 11 days, we had shot like 4 movies. And just one caveat, that one of those movies was actually edited and delivered before the end of that month. One of them.
Where were you when I was at film school? Because I would just go back and forth with my instructors that, you go to film school, they teach you a studio system.
Right.
And the people that are teaching this system are zealous towards this system and cannot break from the system at all.
I mean, I find that even with, when you join like filmmaking groups and stuff, there's a good number of the people that are like that too. Like, you can't make a movie unless you have 3 years or 2 years or a year and a half. And like, I don't want to come off like a crusader for like cheap movies or fast movies. Like, I like having more time. I love to, but like as independent, like not wealthy people, I don't know about you, but I can't afford to take a year to make a movie. Like I can't.
Well,
like
that's the thing. Yeah, that's the thing that. And one of the reasons I started this podcast was just for this reason right here is I did my independent micro budget film fast, and we crowdfunded it, did it under $10,000, the whole thing. But part of the reason it took so long, it took me about 5 years, but part of the reason, because part of that was me going through film school, writing the script while I was in film school, and just taking my time with it. But I can't make a movie every 5 years. But by the time I'm
not if you want to make a living at it.
Not if I want to make a living. If I want to leave a legacy, by the time I die, I would have only had made 5 or 6 things. You know what I mean? So I want to leave more behind, but I also want to make a living and prosper and do all those things. So even doing it the way I did it was, you follow like a lot of the templates of micro budget filmmaking. The landscape, and part of it is due to what Amazon's paying and the distribution landscape right now. I've got to once again figure out a new system, a new approach of how to make money and make a career at this thing. And one thing is, it's got to be done a lot faster. It just has to be done a lot faster. I can't. So I'm considering and you tell me your advice, but I'm considering scriptment and shooting, like have hard, fast rules, say 4 days, no more than 4 days, use a scriptment, rehearse it with the actors, plan your coverage, plan everything, and also limit the crew. Having a smaller crew, you can move a little faster, because when you've got more people, it's just more it's more to explain. It's more everything. I appreciate everybody that helped me make Lion Killer. It's just that the landscape is always evolving, and I've got to evolve with it. So
you can also only ask for favors so long, and like the bigger your crew is, the more favors that you're asking, the more people that are working, or more people that are working for less money than what they're used to, or whatever it is. So yeah. So I think everything sounds pretty good. I consider myself to be a writer first. That's what I got into. So I believe, and the writing part of it doesn't cost you anything. So
other than time is the only thing.
Yeah, that's true. It's your time,
Yeah.
But because I know some filmmakers that do the scriptment thing, and they do it, and they make them. I believe in the written word, so I would say write the script, but I know people that do it. There's a filmmaker named Dustin Ferguson. He does that a lot, and a lot of his stuff's cool, and he does well with it. But I'm more I like to write it out. But I guess it also kind of depends on your troupe of actors, and if you have actors that are good at that are witty, that are intelligent, that can come up with the dialogue that you need.
Very true.
That's great. But you're also at that mercy too.
Yeah. They're playing a much bigger role than a lot of times than they even maybe would like.
Yeah, it's a lot of pressure on them, but some thrive with it.
You have any other rules to making micro budget films in the fashion you've made them in the past, which is maybe 2 or 3 4-day shoots?
Yeah, I would say the average for those shoots was 5 days. We did the couple of 1 days, but most of them were 5, 6, 7, and 8. You
think that's a sweet spot? Kind of like 5 days is a sweet spot.
Financially, 6 days is, because if you're doing if you have any kind of name actors, and if you're making a micro budget for, whatever, 25,000, you might be able to afford a name actor for a day or two. So, which is going to cause you to go SAG. So, a SAG week is 6 days. If you go anything over 6 days, you're on to another week. So it's kind of this, even if you're not paying union rates, even crews kind of look at stuff like that. They're like, hey, if I'm working 7 days, I get overtime on the 7th day. Stuff like that. So 6 days is kind of financially, but I think creatively, I don't like to have less than 8 on narrative stuff anymore. It's at least that way I can break it into 2 4-day weeks. And, I feel like you can get, if you're prepared and the script is right for that, low budget, I think you can make something good in 8 days. I think once it starts getting shorter than that,
you start compromising.
You're compromising
performance and everything else.
And just and it's not just a quality thing; it's a commerciality thing. And I think if you want to have something that's a narrative feature that's truly going to make money, you have to have a certain amount of polish on it. It's got to look like a movie. And I just don't feel like anymore you can get that in 4 or 5 days.
Yeah.
So some people do, but I'm it's just the marketplace has become so crowded now. When I first started making these movies, when I would walk into a room full of producers and start talking and be like, oh yeah, we just made this movie in 5 days, and their jaws would drop. They either wouldn't believe you, or they'd be like, that's fucking awesome. How do you do? How could you? Couldn't conceive of it. But now you can't walk into a Producers Guild meeting anywhere and throw a rock where somebody hasn't made a movie in 5 days. So everybody's doing it. So now you have the quality of the product has to stand out. There's just too much competition. Just making the movie is not good enough. In 2012, you could make a mediocre $10,000 movie and make some money on it. You could, and I don't like to say what I was doing was all mediocre. I think some of them were really good, but there were, the producers weren't necessarily looking for anything more than let's turn it over and make a buck, but if you really want to make a buck, you have to step it up.
Well, that brings me to my other question, which is making a buck.
Yeah.
and the current landscape of distribution and how independent filmmakers can make money. Now, I know your YouTube channel focuses a lot on this, and so you're the man to ask. How do we make money?
So, and this is a little bit counter to what I just said, but you have to make it cheaper and faster, or it just has to be like the second coming good. You know what I mean? But yeah, I mean, you just can't, like, again, when I was making them, 10 years ago, I could make a $20,000 horror movie that came out pretty good. And, it'd make $100,000 in a year. That same exact movie today, you'd be lucky to make 10 grand on. I mean, I made a horror movie 3 years ago now, called Death Day, or The Campus. Distributor changed the title. And dude, that budget was around, I think our hard cost was around 55,000, maybe 100 with deferments. We had a 22-day schedule. Like, I mean, that movie in 2012 it would have killed. I mean, I'd probably still be living off of it. But the landscape had changed so much that same exact, even better caliber movie. I mean, I'm not saying we've almost made the budget back. Almost.
Like you just said, that movie today would make $10,000. So
yeah,
to have a career, you'd have to make that either for nothing or for 1,000, and then do 3 or 4 of them a year.
Yeah, I think if you're going to be, so this is what happened to me after that one. Cause like, I felt like when I was going into that movie, I had the business figured out. I mean, I was part of all of these movies, and those movies, like, collectively made millions of dollars. Not any one of them made $1 million, but collectively, they were like, if I would have ownership in some of those movies, I'd be doing much better. So anyway, I thought I had it figured out. So then that movie and one other that I worked on with some friends came out around that time, and it just made me I was like, oh my gosh, like I have to change my tack. So maybe about 1.5 years ago, I started hearing from a couple of other producers that documentaries were doing really well for independent filmmakers. And honestly, at the time, I had no interest really in documentaries, but I was like, well, I guess maybe if I like the subject. So I threw together this dog rescue documentary, and I did it. I did the interviews in, I think, 2 days, and I edited the entire thing in probably 4 days. I mean, I just, bam, put it together. Feature. Well, it was like 65 minutes. So yeah, 65 minutes, and I put it out, and I did self-distribution on Amazon. They were paying a little bit better then, and I made it for nothing. I shot it with my camera. I did the sound, I did everything, did all the editing. So, I mean, production was just my time. And then, I think the first month I made like $1,000 on it, which, isn't like huge money, but it was like, it's $1,000. And I was like, oh, wait a minute, if I can make these in like 4 days and make $1,000 a piece. So like, I did like 6 more, and some would make more, some would make less. And then over the course of the last like 6 months, I started getting more savvy about what kind of documentaries are going to sell, the stuff that I'm into that's going to connect, how to connect with an audience better. And, the one I just did, the Don't Call Me Bigfoot, I mean, it streamed like 2 million minutes a week. Like, I mean, now if I would have put that out in 2017, I would have made 20 grand last month on it. Now with Amazon's rates, I only made about 2. But that's just on Amazon. So like, it'll be on 4 or 5 other platforms next month, making that or more than that. So like that one movie will be making, I don't know, 3,000 or 4,000 a month. And it's just a doc. So then what I'm doing now, so I shoot probably 3. I started out doing 4, but now I've cut it down to like 2 and 3 a month documentaries, and that's like my day job. And then like once or twice a year, I'll do another narrative, and the way I look at it now is I'm just going to put, like all my passion and, into the narrative, and this is going to be my thing. But if it doesn't do well, I have the documentary money to fall back on. So like, and I've gotten to like doing the documentaries more, the more I've done them. Now I'm like kind of into it. I would still, narratives where my passion is, but I just don't do them like I used to. Now, if you were going to just do straight narratives, like that was the goal, yeah, I would say that, they need to be under $10,000 or over 500,000. There's like no good middle ground with it anymore. Like a $50,000 independent film, you're most likely going to lose your money. I don't give a shit what the genre is or who's in it. 50 grand, you're 90% sure you're going to lose. So I would say you have to do $10,000 movies, and I'd say you need to make one every 3 months. Because like I said, like with streaming, you have basically a 90-day new release window. And once you're off that 90 days, you're going to drop, so you have to have something new feeding that, or your money is just not going to stay steady, and we're talking about if you're lucky, if the movie does well, you're talking about maybe a couple of grand a month on one movie. Yeah. And that's not, that's not like, it's, that's minimum wage basically. So it's like, and again, that's just Amazon. Now there are other platforms, but like for the longest time, you couldn't even get on other platforms. I hadn't dealt with a distributor since campus, and I had such a bad experience with those guys. I was just like, you know what, I'm just going to self-distribute. But now, because the way that Amazon's paying so much less, it's not quite as feasible as it once was. And you kind of, you need that extra push. You need to be able to get onto platforms like Tubi or IMDb TV or all these ones that you can't submit to directly. But luckily now there's distributors like Indie Rights, where, they'll take 20%. They won't charge you anything up front. They charge you no sales fees. And it's basically just like putting it out yourself, but they're getting you on the platform. Yeah. I mean, they're not gonna help you like promote much, but they'll give you feedback and, and they do like, there's some stuff that they do like with the other filmmakers where the other filmmakers kind of help each other out. That's really cool. But I mean, most important thing though, is they're honest. Like they're completely transparent. Like you get the reports, like clockwork, if there's money owed, they get it, so it's just like some people get unhappy with them, because they're a smaller distributor. So you're not going to, if you made a $250,000 movie, I mean, I don't give a shit who's distributing it. You're going to have trouble recouping that. But Indie Rights is a smaller distributor. That's like their bread and butter is a little bit smaller than that. But I was also surprised once I started looking at the other filmmakers' work, how much good work is with them. And again, take this advice with a grain of salt because it's really too early to say. But with the way Amazon is dropping the rates, and now, a lot of people are saying IMDb TV is going to be the new thing, but it's curated. You can't get on there directly. Yeah. And the only way to get there is through either a distributor like Indie Rights or, one of those aggregator or marketplaces like Film Hub. Mm-hmm. But the problem with both of those is if, you put your movie up on Amazon yourself, neither of them is going to put it on IMDb TV or some of these other platforms. So it's like, you got to make that call. Is Amazon in and of itself worth me self-distributing this movie? And, 2 years ago, I would have said yes, but now, I mean, shit. I mean, I'm looking at other filmmakers now, a lot of other filmmakers that are making these some excellent movies. I mean, there's a few movies I watched from Indie Rights where I was like, it made me feel like shit, man, I got to step it up. And you talk to the filmmakers and these like really fucking excellent movies have like customer engagement rankings of like 30%, so like this excellent movie, like with like studio production value is making 1 cent an hour, and I learned from Don't Call Me Bigfoot, like I streamed more minutes on that than probably 95% of the movies that are with Indie Rights. Like, I mean, it killed. Like the number of minutes it did, it killed. And, it had a 40% CER and made just under $2,000. You know, it's like, and I personally, like, I mean, there's always outliers, but I think that's on the high end of what you can stream.
Yeah, you know.
So like, you know, it's just not feasible at that rate. You know, and you know, even if your movie's good, you know, because I used to keep saying, well, if your movie's really good, cream's going to rise to the top. But then you see all these other really good movies.
So much cream out there. There's so much cream.
God, dude. And they're making a penny an hour, and it's just. I mean, you would have to stream over, like, you'd have to stream over like 100 million minutes to make a decent amount of money on Amazon, and that is next to impossible for an indie, like, you know, an indie level, no promotion budget to do. I mean, I'm good at promotion. And I mean, I think we did a really good job with Don't Call Me Bigfoot. And I think that's probably about, I mean, that's close to as good as I can do, you know, as far as numbers go. So like, you know, if I can't make more than that, you know, I have to diversify.
Let's get back to using niche as a marketing tool. Of course, horror in and of itself is a great niche, but jiu-jitsu, martial arts, is what I'm passionate about. So, you know,
I mean, it's a specific niche. It's a specific niche too, so it should be good.
Yeah. Do you feel that's the way for filmmakers to go?
Yes, I honestly, I think if you're anything under $50,000 these days, like, the niching down is like, it's crucial. I mean, our world becomes more and more fractured every year. You know, there's more and more platforms. I mean, shit, there are streaming platforms now that are like dedicated to specific genres. You know, we now have Shudder, and we have documentary channels, and, you know, it's, I mean, basically streaming has become like old cable TV. You know, and there's all of these different platforms looking for content. But then the problems also is there's so many more options. There's so many less people, so of course it's going to pay less. But yeah, you have to, in order to succeed on anything small, I think you have to niche it way down. Like if you're doing horror, it's not enough to just say, hey, I'm going to do a horror movie. You have to do a specific kind of horror movie. And it's not even enough anymore to say, hey, I'm going to do a zombie horror movie. No, it has to be a specific kind of zombie horror movie. You need to take it another step. It's got to be like zombies World War II. It's got to be zombies versus cowboys. It's got to be zombies versus, you know, 300, whatever. You know,
Jiu-jitsu zombies. Jiu-jitsu zombies.
Yeah, totally. And and then you have to figure out where the people that you know are into that and that specific thing are, and then you basically, it's like an undercover cop. You got to infiltrate that group. You got to ingratiate yourself.
Become part of that community.
Yes, and a contributing member of the community. I've learned so much about marketing in general just from like studying YouTube growth. Because it hit me. So, you know, I've made, probably 13 or 14 documentaries this year, maybe more. And so a lot of them. So like, and so I put one out and I do all the same shit. And I'm like, why isn't this one going, you know? And then, you know, I start watching these YouTube videos and they're talking about retention. And, you know, you start thinking about CER on Amazon. And you're like, why is my CER so low? And then you start looking at your unique streams divided by your total number of minutes. And then you realize, holy shit, people are only watching this 90-minute movie on average for like 15 minutes. That's not so great. And on YouTube, they talk over and over about how to keep people watching, people watching. And then if you start applying some of that logic to your actual like movie, like of course you always think of your movie as a whole, but you're thinking of it at that 15-minute mark. Like, I don't want people to click off. Like, how do I get people to stay on there? Because now we're living in an age where whether it's a big budget movie or a low budget movie, everybody's watching their shit on Netflix. And at any moment, they're just going to flip onto something else. Yeah. If it's not, so like
I do it all the time. Yeah.
How do I keep the audience engaged? And the thing that they talk about, which is what we were mentioning earlier, it's about adding something of value to that audience, giving something to that audience. And once you stop doing that and start being self-indulgent or whatever, I'm making it for me, you start losing the viewers, and once I started thinking of it like that, I started noticing an increase in my retention rate on Amazon.
Yeah. Well, the key point you're hitting on is audience and making the film for your audience versus yourself.
Right. Unless you are the audience.
Well, unless you have a firm grasp on your audience, because I have a lot of friends that are filmmakers that will tell you very point blank, I want to make, or I make films, or I want to make films. I want to take what's in my head and make that. That's what I'm making. And there's no other thought other than the creativity in their head. But the truth is, man, once you start taking those films out, whether it's to compete in film festivals or to compete in the marketplace trying to sell your film, oftentimes you'll get a rude awakening if it can be very self-indulgent just to say, I'm going to take what's in my head and then just make that film and think that it's going to be a success because it came from you.
Oh yeah. Well, the problem too is we have this whole generation of filmmakers now that we were basically like coming of age around the 90s, like independent explosion.
Yeah, that was my Clerks,
Tarantino,
all that. That's
Rodriguez, Kevin Smith. Well, and we bought into that mystique,
Mm-hmm.
But you got to remember that like these guys, even though there was whatever, a dozen of them, but these were still lottery ticket winners.
Yeah.
I mean, yes, they're super talented, but they also were fucking lucky. And it's not every, like, one out of 10,000 or more or less is gonna have that kind of luck. The rest of us have to eke out a living.
Yeah.
So and even, and I get a lot of people giving me static sometimes saying, well, you're talking too much about business, or making it too commercial. Think about the audience. What about artistry? Blah, blah, blah. It's like, listen to a interview with Spielberg, one of the top directors of all time. And he sits there and talks about audience. Like when he's looking through the viewfinder, he's looking at it like he was a 4-year-old kid looking up at the big screen and audience. It's about the audience, and that's why he's so successful. And yes, he has that artistic bent as well, but he's a very commercially minded director. Spike Lee is a commercially minded director. Yes, he does the other thing too, but it's like too much of the time as filmmakers, we just buy into the romanticism of like auteur theory and the artistic integrity. And, a lot of that's just bullshit,
Yeah. Well, the real world will strip you from that real quick.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, so that brings me to my final question, which is, we've talked a lot. What is your advice? If you could sum it up, if you were to talk to a first-time filmmaker or somebody who was about to embark on the journey of making their first film, what's the advice you'd give them?
Make it for the audience. Don't make your movie, make their movie. That make it as fast as you can and as cheap as you can, while still, maintaining your quality.
Well, when you said make it for them, you lost 90% of the filmmakers right there.
I know. But spend 20 years in the business, like doing this stuff, and then come back to me and tell me I'm full of shit. I mean, there's different paths, but like if you're going to be working in independent film, under $100,000, you have to make them quick, you have to make them fast, and you have to make them with the audience in mind. It works out for me better than some, because my tastes are so extremely broad. I love movies. Like I love documentary movies, and I love dramas and romantic comedies and horror. I have really broad tastes, so I could turn around and make a romantic comedy and then a horror movie and love them equally and not feel like I'm selling out. But not everybody feels like that.
So before we get out of here, where can people find you online, and how can they connect with you and become a subscriber?
So pretty much I'm the J Horton across the board, Twitter and Instagram. My YouTube is J Horton. My Patreon is J Horton. So pretty much J Horton.
And now filmmakers go and chew on that.